there's thousands of times in which I'll put something out there, and then I'm like, I wish I could have taken that line away, or at least I could have changed this. But it's too late. It's out there for public consumption. Does that ever happen with you and like your sound designing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't done that much like sound designing for narrative stuff, but like for music and you know, certain things. And then eventually if you hear it over and over again, it just like live with you. It either like you're either like, okay, that's there, and like I feel emotionally neutral about it now, or you just like get to like it out of familiarity too.
Yeah.
You know. But just like with, just going off something that Simone was saying with acting, you know, kind of like imagining yourself in the situation. I think the same thing is true with the sound design. And like, okay, how does this like, how does the energy flow here if I were actually in this situation? And like, what am I hearing in the background? What's in the foreground? Like all of those things. It's really like, there's almost an acting element to it where you have to like kind of put yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
This makes me think of... it's a question for Vanessa, and it says, what expectations do you come with when approaching our episodes? And what keeps your attention or piques your interest when listening?
What expectations do I come with when approaching episodes? Here's the thing. So like I said, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. And so it's not that I don't come with any expectations at all, but it's just that I don't, like I come in pretty open.
Real quick, I thought you were about to say, here's the thing, I haven't listened to any of y'all episodes. I was going to be so shook.
No, I've never listened to your episodes. No, but I come in pretty open just because this is a whole new experience for me. And like, obviously, I've heard stories through audio, but still the podcasting experience and all of that is new to me. But generally what keeps my attention or piques my interest when listening is I'm always just kind of connecting it back to like other conversations I've had or work that I've done. So like I remember when I was listening to the first episode, and obviously it deals a lot with like, you know, the idea of space travel and things like that.
Yeah.
But the moon particularly interested me just because I've been writing, or I wrote an article before about, who is it? Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, whatever. Wanted to go colonize the moon.
Yeah.
And so it made me start thinking about like what we're seeing going on in real time with like some of the big names in tech, and what those possibilities are, which again is pretty much the purpose of speculative fiction. Because I think a lot of times when people, you know, hear or read work, and we talked about this before, but like take Octavia Butler, people are like, she's so prophetic, but how much of it is prophecy? How much of it is people listening to and being in tune with political conversations of their time, and able to kind of say, well, this is happening, and we're going to show you a possible trajectory, and we're just not going to fill in the in-between. We're just going to show you like this point all the way down the line.
That's real.
So yeah, being able to like see what other people are getting from the political time that we're in, and being able to see what stories that they're forming from these same moments is something that really keeps me in tune.
That's actually really, I like that a lot.
I guess that like does kind of dovetail with the question that I wrote for you about like how does fiction, and like especially speculative fiction, like I guess like inspire the community or listeners in a way that other type of writing or audio doesn't. And I mean, I think you might have just answered that, but I was wondering if you could like speak a little more about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like that question. I know that for me, I did not see myself like writing sci-fi or anything like that at all. And published work wise, I haven't done a lot, but my novel is like sci-fi, and it's very much based on dealing with like AI and things like that. And this is something I started getting more into after I started covering technology. I got a job at Afrotech. Since then, I moved on covering tech and politics at Mike. And when I cover tech, you know, I don't know how Wi-Fi works. I don't know what makes a computer run, but I'm interested in like the social impacts of technology. And so I think writing sci-fi and reading sci-fi and kind of like revisiting some of the old stories I enjoyed helps me to work through the things that I'm reading and like having to write about and talk about today. And like I said, I think sometimes you just need fiction to help people see what's happening in front of them. You know, I could be like, hey, Amazon is evil. Don't trust Facebook. All the big tech, you know, down with it. But people aren't really going to get it sometimes unless they happen to read a science fiction story that has a company that looks remarkably similar to Facebook or Amazon and has a head that looks remarkably similar to Zuckerberg or Bezos. And then they start thinking about, oh, well, this person, this author, obviously has to be drawing inspiration from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's real. And like, I think we forget that like you're talking about making these statements a reality and having people hear them, but we forget that there's ongoing campaigns by these tech companies to obfuscate and make those realities like harder to understand, or just straight up lie about them, deny them from the first place. So your average human being, it's they're hearing different opinions and different things from different directions. So it's harder for them to like, I guess, work amidst all that, like, you know, all those opinions and know what the truth really is, which is why fiction works so well, because it's looking kind of a trick, really. You pull people into a world that they don't expect these things to come out of a lot of the time, and they start to, get intimate with characters, to connect to a character, and then when those real world things start to apply to that character, then, you know, it's very clear what the situation is, and they can start to see that in their own, like, lives and stuff, in reality. So I do think fiction is a political tool, honestly, and I think Afrofuturism and other Black fiction writers have understood that and used it for this in the very same way, like Octavia Butler, like you just mentioned earlier.
I feel like Vanessa kind of like walking towards my question, which was like, after listening, did you find yourself having any fears or hopes regarding technology's current and future impact on relationships? Because I guess just to keep it specific to this phase, but if you want to expand.
No, I like specific to this phase.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I read that question and I was like, oh, absolutely. Recently I wrote an article for Wear Your Voice, where 60 Minutes ran a story on, is he Harvard? Some Ivy League professor.
Harvard? Oh, no.
I think he was with Harvard, but essentially an Ivy League professor, and he was looking at designing a dating app that would match you based on DNA. And the idea was to eliminate like genetic diseases. So it's eugenics.
Oh, I saw this article on the TL. Where I learned all my things.
And so for sure, I think one thing, and this is what I got from a conversation with the source I used for that article, was just that a lot of times people do think that they're intimate relationships, you know. We like to think of them as free from a lot of other influences, and we like to think that this is an area of our lives that it's like closed off, secretive. You know, the government, companies, they're not involved there, but that's not the truth. The government has fiddled in intimate moments since the dawn of time. Like, you can look at eugenics again, you can look at sterilization programs. Yep. You can even think about, you know, who are you able to meet? Who are you able to associate with based on like class barriers and other sort of things. And so I absolutely do have fears regarding technology's current and future impact on relationships. It's not easy to be like, this is like my overarching concern, but I just look at people who are, you know, thinking about ways to bring eugenics or racial pseudosciences back into the mainstream. You can even connect DNA testing to that and the whole trend of figuring out where you're from and figuring out who you are. And so now we're developing our relationships and like this concept of connection to a place based on what is frankly bad science when you get into it. And hopes regarding it, honestly, I'm pretty pessimistic on a good day. But I definitely think that people can use tech to not like perpetuate these things. That you can absolutely use tech to not perpetuate racial science and like eugenics and all of that. And so I think one thing that I hope to see is that I do hope to see more Black people and Black youth in particular getting involved with these realms and kind of connecting with tech, and realizing that you can interact with this space and talk about it, have opinions on it without necessarily being like a computer scientist or engineer yourself.
Okay, well, I was just wondering, bringing it back to the relationships one, like what in specific kind of led to that? The choice is that as the theme for the first phase, or did it kind of evolve naturally as you were starting to work out story ideas?
It definitely evolved naturally. There were some themes that overlapped, but we decided that we wanted relationships to be the overarching theme. And so we kind of tailored the rest after we decided that. to be more about the relationships between the entities in the story.
Yeah. I think we thought of episode 1 before we had to decide what the phase would be.
Yeah.
And episode 1 is like, I mean, it's a familial relationship. And it's a very wholesome one, I'd say. We start off things off generally in a pretty warm, like wholesome way. And we thought like the connection between the parents and the children, and between the children themselves was just like really the core theme of the episode. And from that, we started thinking about organically the other episode ideas we had, and something just kind of took shape from that. And we decided that's what we would explore for the first phase and see where it takes us from there. Not all the phases are going to be as like relationship is such a broad term, and some of them will be a little bit more specific, I think. Yeah, I think it was a good place to start in the first place, because what we're talking about really is our communities, and we all have relationships to each other as well. So it was like an easy way to get in. Yeah, it's very relatable.
Easy to get into.
Yeah.
So off of that, I would say like the only happy relationship would be in the first episode. And I also noticed that isolation, loneliness, and codependency were major themes for these 3 episodes. Was there like a particular reason you chose to analyze relationships under that frame?
I would say that, well, we wanted a balance. Episode 1 was, like I said, like really wholesome and stuff. So we didn't want to lean too far into negative, but we didn't want to also like lie. We want to be kind of realistic about like the nature of relationships in the first place.
And the nature of tech within relationships.
Exactly. And they're complex, right? Because, for example, episode 3, very much a lonely narrative right there. But at the same time, there's motherhood in that. Like Seta's relationship to the professor is one of a mother. And then even motherhood from Seta trying to take upon that role himself when he created all the creatures, and he calls himself a mother. And his relationship to the creatures, I would say, is very sweet. It's like it's kind of cute to see like how he perceived his own relationship to his professor and how he tried to emulate it, and like where he had faults and where it worked really well for him, and what it transformed to become. And then even with relationship episode 2, we had the conflict between the couple, but then also very tender moments between the couple in which they like speak on each other or speak to each other in their moments of like where they're down and like they're defeated. They pick each other up, and in the end they get to fight the main person that's been putting them through the struggle the entire time. So where we show like the negative sides of relationship, I think we also show the reflection, the opposite, the positive side, and vice versa.
A fear of mine with episode 2 was that I know a lot of queer and LGBTQI related stories always have a couple that are not happy together, have some kind of tragic ending.
Yeah.
It's just there's some issue, and I was like, I hope this doesn't fall into that. I wasn't cognizant of it as I was writing, and then I was like, wait. Like as soon as I finished, I was like, oh. But I was hoping, like Addie said, there would be some good balance between moments that felt like they were tender and moments that felt like this is a real kind of conflict that's believable and happens within any kind of couple. And also, I hope that people would feel like the couple in that episode stuck with each other through the end.
Exactly.
And kind of had a bond through enduring this thing together. And there's a question that we got about that episode ending in a cliffhanger and where that ended for them. And I wanted audiences to kind of make up their own ending for that story, how they thought it would go. But in my mind, it's a happy ending for them. They're not attacked physically, maybe mentally throughout that story, yeah. But they get out alive. They tell their story in the end to like the public, and yeah. So my intention was not for that couple to have this like tragic dead in the woods story.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't know that they made it out alive in episode 2. Last thing I hear is Marisha screaming.
So feel being optimistic, but it's okay.
I mean, like, it's a computer, so like
the power is in
it
your
could go
heart.
either way.
It really
yeah.
could.
Yes.
Well, I think like in episode 2, I don't know, in a lot of like successful science fiction, like it's like a little window into a world. Like I think in episode 2,